Much, Kelly, and I'm sure a lot of you have questions for both Maria and Kelly, so we're going to give you guys a chance to do just that.
Okay, we'll put a couple of chairs up here, give the ladies some microphones, and we'll be passing microphones around the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, just like you did in class way back when, and we'll hand you the microphone. This question and answer portion will last about 15 to 20 minutes, so please don't be shy.
Yes, there's going to be mics going around, so just feel free to raise your hand. For either of them, you can ask any of them questions. Kelly and Maria, do you mind joining us up on stage, please? Thank you. Okay, who would like to start? Who's the brave student? No one? You have no questions for either of them? Oops, one in the back.
You're so thorough.
Right there. Could you pass the mic over? Over here to the right. Right there. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good morning. I'm Anthony. I'm actually a Rappler ambassador. Thanks, Maria, for picking me. Knowing that, my question is for Miss Kelly. Knowing that most media corporations are also business entities, how do you draw the line between journalism and public relations?
I thought you were going to say, how do you draw the line between journalism and entertainment? And I would have argued that there is no line. Can I answer that? No. I think it's what I tried to touch on earlier, which is that manufacturers, organizations, all have direct access now, right, to consumers. And it's often put together as if it is a news item. And this gets us back to the point that I made about media news literacy. I really think that this is the one challenge that we're all communities across the globe are going to be facing, because the lines are clearly blurred. And people who are news consumers and have been used to consuming news under a different model really haven't caught up completely with the changes that have happened in the marketplace. And so I think that at the academic level, at the nonprofit level, we have to push for news literacy and a better understanding of how this information is being delivered to the public. And I think that will help to make those lines more distinct again. But it's a process, and things are changing very quickly. So there's going to be some time of confusion and unfortunately a disservice to the public.
All right. Any more questions? Yes. Oh.
Good morning. My name is Karen. I'm a country director of an INGO, Plan International in the Philippines. We're a big fan of Rappler. We're a big fan of crowdsourcing. In fact, we're looking at crowdsourcing in emergency responses of assessment data. Sorry for my voice. I have a bit of a cold. I'm not sure if the previous asker of the question is happy with the answer that you gave. So are you happy with that answer? Because I'm actually not too happy about it. See, my problem is that when we consume news, I don't think the biggest problem is with us being educated and literate. I think the biggest problem that we're facing now is, to be honest, that a lot of media outlets are owned by big businesses. And so when you ask that question about the line and, where do you draw the line, I'm actually really, really worried about what can we trust and what can we not. So maybe if you can try again.
Can I help on this?
I don't know. Can you?
And then I'm sure we'll come up with something that will satisfy you. But I think, first of all, I do agree that to some degree, because you are now part of the creation, you must also take some responsibility for it, which means we must boost news literacy. And news literacy is not about, it's the ability to tell whether somebody has a vested interest. Right? So look at Indonesia, for example. In the last presidential elections, for the first time, the television stations, journalists in television stations actually took sides of candidates. Why? Because their owners took sides. But the Indonesian public actually realized that, and now you have the journalists backtracking and trying to go back. That was interesting to see, that they themselves recognize it. In fact, next week, next week or the week after, there's a forum in Jakarta where journalists are doing their own soul searching. So the journalists are going through this. The organizations, definitely, you guys know people are trying to manipulate you, right? You know that. And television, there is nothing more manipulative than television and video now in your mobile, because everything on that screen is planned with a purpose to manipulate you. So whether or not it was the old traditional world where the power elites, the traditional media, held the power and they could control your perception of the world, now it is a much more democratized, seemingly more chaotic, but far more colorful. It has voices of the marginalized. It has, you're still going to be manipulated, which is why there is greater responsibility on you to not be swayed by the wind and to understand. Now I will shut up based on, but that's my thing. I must put some onus on you, and this is why I like the Rappler audience. Good God, you guys are so, you hold us accountable. You share in the responsibility with the journalists now to hold power accountable. I'll shut up.
No, but I agree with you, and I also think that, look, it's nothing new that journalism is a business.
Next question.
Right? Journalists expect to be paid, and businesses have owned journalism entities forever. Right? So nothing has changed there. What I think, though, is that more and more we're seeing clearer agendas, right? Or more aggressive, maybe not clearer, but more aggressive agendas. And I think that the one thing that journalists can do in those situations is to really strive for transparency. If you have a stake in a situation, I mean, especially on the citizen journalism front, if you are reporting a story in the streets of Cairo, and your family members were killed, right, in a previous protest, I think that clearly is going to color the perspective from which you are tweeting or engaging in social media. So transparency across the board, whether it's with traditional journalists or citizen journalists or whatever else we evolve into, is going to be key. But again, you don't want consumers on the hook. I think this is a partnership. I think that as a news consumer, because I'm not only a news producer, but I'm also a news consumer, I have to play an active role in understanding what those sources of information are and how credible those sources of information are, and then what to do with the information that's been presented to me. I think that you don't have a choice anymore. If you want to be engaged and you want to contribute to society, you have to do your homework. Sorry. Just because it's on the internet doesn't make it real. It's not true. I have this conversation with my students all the time. And when we only turn to familiar sources, right? We're gonna end up with hearing the same old stuff rehashed over and over again. How are we ever going to solve problems and come up with new narratives and new solutions if all we do is look to places that we've always looked and find out what they're saying, right? So consumers have to take an active role. We're in this together. We are in this together. Journalism is more interactive online and in real life than ever before.
I agree with the transparency from all sides.
Is that better?
Well, yeah, that is better.
Good to know.
I'm still not completely convinced, but the transparency I think is crucial. I think for us as activists and citizen journalists, of course we disclose why we have an interest and why we report, but I think it also goes the other way. And to be honest, it's not always clear with big media outlets where their vested interests are. And I won't name any, but you know
Please
who they
feel
are.
free.
Who do I give my mic back to?
Let's spice it up. Name them.
You guys did great work, by the way, in Yolanda, in Haiyan. Yeah, and that video that I will remember from Haiyan came out of your citizen journalist from Plan.
Thank you. Any more questions? We've probably got time for a couple more.
Thanks. Jake de Guzman from Game Plan and Green Living TV. Related to the previous two questions, for Kelli and Maria, what's the pattern you're seeing in the discernment of the crowd? Anecdotally, not necessarily generally. How are crowds discerning news information and maybe even processing it? And then a second question related to the mood meter. What emotions are sort of directing people to what kind of actions? The negative emotions, positive emotions, even just anecdotally.
Okay, so I think the first danger is related to the first question from Plan, which is echo chambers. So the other part we didn't mention is that what you will tend to do now, given all of this sources of information, which not all have been verified, is to go to the ones that reflect your own bias. And so that's the next part, which I'm sure tomorrow the journalists will talk about bias. Oftentimes people say it is the bias of the journalist, but it is also the bias of the reader. And more, it's shifting out of the bias of the writer or whichever group you're reading to your own bias. There's a great book called The Hidden Brain, and it really talks about this, that in general, you will look for the things that reflect your own opinions. So the biggest danger right now, and you're seeing it happen in the United States, and I'll toss it to Kelli after this, was you're seeing happen, people getting stuck and partisan politics moving into this whole other realm. So don't just, now a news organization cannot force feed you the other side. But keep an open mind. That's part of the reason I think it is important for us to engage, to collaborate, to actually talk to each other about it. Be careful of your own hidden bias. And when I'm accused of being biased as a reporter, and this goes from CNN to ABS to Rappler, I always say, like, if both sides are accusing me of bias on an issue, I always say, well, that's great. If only one side's accusing me of bias, then I have a problem. But if both sides are, then I know that bias is in the eyes of the beholder. And this happens a lot more in the Philippines. So in the States, you have that other thing of echo chamber. The second part of your question is what emotions go through the mood meter. And this is globally, and you can even see some of it in the studies. And academic institutions have been the ones that have done this in the States. Negative emotions spread fastest. There's a great, if you go online and look for Twitter, they actually did a very nice map of emotion spreading. In Harvard, they did a study they gave cell phones to a select case group, and then they looked at the emotions that were transmitted on this. It's a fascinating study. And what it shows you is when you're angry, this is part of the reason, if you really want to be a discerning member of the crowd, when you're angry, take a breath and then give it a little time. Anger spreads fastest. So Shahira Amin, who is here from Egypt, if you guys know her, Shahira was the deputy news editor of Nile TV, who walked off on air because Nile TV is state television during the Arab Spring, and walked in to join the supporters. She'll talk tomorrow about the fine line between journalism and activism. But again, you have to be clear when anger drives you. You have to be clear what you then pass on to others.
Maria mentioned the polarization that currently exists in the United States, and it does, and it's led to a complete inaction, right, on the part of lawmakers and others, because we have a society that is truly split, and media has definitely played a role in that. And there is a tendency for news consumers to block out information that they just don't agree with, and I sort of feel that there's less of a chance in our society of accidental news exposure. Despite the unbelievable amount of information that's out there, people really only pay attention and digest what they choose to digest. And so when I was a kid growing up and there was a newspaper on the table, I might see a photo or read a story that I otherwise would not have sought out because there it was, right? Well, now, my kids are here on their mobiles, and so they're only tuning in to information that they think is interesting. So this notion, or I might walk in when I was a kid and hear a newscast on the air. and hear stories and absorb something that may have taught me something different or allowed me to look at something from a different perspective. That opportunity again, fewer and fewer of those opportunities for folks to hear from other people or from other points of view, which leads to the situation that we currently have in the States. So absolutely something that we're going to have to continue to navigate. But again, despite my friend's objection, I believe that, again, this comes down to news consumers, right? So either you're willing to hear and learn, or you're not. And I think, as a productive citizen, that you should absolutely be open to having your mind changed. Right? What are you afraid of?
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Anyone over on this side? Or this gentleman right there?
Wait, I can't stand up. Hi, can I just stay here? Yeah. I'm Kyle Salcedo from Active Citizenship Foundation and National Youth Commission, and I'd like to stand up. I'd just like to ask this question to both our speakers. You've mentioned a while ago about the potential of crowdsourcing, but how can you reconcile this with the reality that our country is still a developing country, that even within our country there's still uneven geographical development, and how can we as young people face this challenge? Thank you.
Great question. And one of the speakers later today is Jackie Chang, Chang, and she's a girl, not Jackie Chan. But she will tell you about Facebook's internet.org, which brings free services to cell phones. You don't need to have an Android phone to do it. And then you'll also hear from Microsoft about their project with government, with DOST, on TV white space, which is how you can piggyback broadband access, internet access on TV signals, because the cell phone signal is weaker than TV reception. So now there's working. I tried it. It's really cool. So the digital divide in the Philippines, in Myanmar, has a 1% to 3% internet penetration rate. It's probably the worst in our region. Again, like, these things are being addressed, and this is all going to change very fast within the next 3 to 5 years. If you talk to our telcos, they will tell you different speeds. But what is it now? 70% of Filipinos access the internet through internet cafes. It is not that the poorest cannot access it, it's just they don't have 24/7 access to it. So that's actually there. The minute they do, for our NGOs and our civil society groups, it will be an amazing, I think that can be a great force for development, because look at what it's doing already. But the danger side of that, and this is the other part of crowdsourcing you didn't hear because I was focusing on its positives, the negatives are this. The crowd can turn into a lynch mob like that. We know it. If you're on social media, you've felt it. So what does this require of us? It requires greater courage to stand up to the mob. So that's the other part. So you see, you don't just get the power for free. I think there are responsibilities that come with that power. The better you exercise it, the better our society will be.
And I think that our colleague Shahira will be able to discuss that, about having the crowd go against you.
I'm so excited.
Very excited about that. But also, I want to get to the ethical part of that equation as well. And as we become more sophisticated users of the internet, manipulation is always a possibility, right? A probability. I mean, we know that it's going to happen. And I believe, we've started to see aggregators and filter sort of organizations emerge, like Storyful, for example, which helps to try to help define those credible voices on the internet that are engaging in those international global discussions about important issues. And I think as journalists continue to use this tool of crowdsourcing, I believe that very smart people on the other end are going to start emerging and becoming more sophisticated in weeding out some of the stuff that, some of the manipulation that we're likely, and we are already seeing. So I think that this goes back to the journalist using this as a tool. This isn't going to be the end-all be-all, right? You still have to go back to the basics of making sure that you have your facts, making sure that you have explored various scenarios, you've talked to a lot of really smart people on a topic, and then using that crowdsourcing as just one more tool for information gathering. But the technology is, like I said, it's unbelievable what people are doing right now in terms of harnessing that power that we're seeing through social media and the internet. And I think even within the next 6 to 9 months, we'll probably see even more new products that are emerging that will help us to make better decisions about the information that we get off the web.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maria and Kelly. How about a big round of applause for them? Thank you.